Good evening to everyone. Kamusta naman tayong lahat ngayong panahon ng pandemya? I am JAYMEE Duran, and I was invited by the Episcopal Commission on Youth to give you this webinar tonight. Let me first introduce myself to you. I am a member of Christian Life Community of the Philippines, or CLC, one of the partner organizations of ECY. Like you, I was also a youth minister before when I was still working full-time for the CLC Formation Institute in 2009 to 2013. After that, I spent some time being a campus minister to young boys at the Ateneo de Manila Grade School from 2013 to 2015. Now, I spend my time as an artist and a mental health advocate. I am one of the mainstay hosts of Pa-Donate ng Sanity, your Filipino mental health podcast. Our topic for today is about self-care. Do you know what self-care is? For a few moments, I invite you to think about the definition of self-care. If you have a piece of paper, maybe you could write down examples of the practices of self-care that you follow. Okay, let's proceed. So according to the Oxford Languages, self-care is a practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. I've lifted 4 key words or phrases from the definition. These are active role, protecting, well-being and happiness, and during periods of stress. Let us discuss these words one by one. First is active role. So the definition again says that it is the practice of taking an active role. When we talk about active role, it means that we are doing something to address the situation. We don't just sit there and wait till we feel better or worse. We do something about it. So that is active role. Second key word is protecting. To protect means to keep safe from harm. Like active, we make sure that nothing bad happens to that thing we're protecting. There is an active role to achieve what we are aiming. So what is it that we are actively protecting? We are actively protecting our well-being and happiness. Well-being is the state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy. Though it is also important to realize that well-being is a broader concept than moment-to-moment happiness. The last key word is the phrase, during periods of stress. So I repeat the definition of self-care again. Self-care is the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. I repeat that. During periods of stress. That's actually where we are right now in this pandemic. We are in a constant period of stress. So it is just fitting that we talk about self-care so that we know what to do, especially during these times. Before we move on, let's read the definition of self-care again. Can you do that with me? Self-care is the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. With the definition of self-care in mind, let us now move on to this question. Why is self-care important to youth ministers? It is important that you, as youth ministers, care for yourselves because you are also responsible for someone else. As a youth minister, one of your primary responsibilities is to care and shepherd for young people. You are responsible in bringing Christ to young people. A lot of young people are looking up to you. So, it is important that you take care of yourself. As a formator, mentor, and shepherd, it is important that you take care of yourself so that you have the strength and energy to care for others. Let us now talk about the different types of self-care. Because we as persons are not just made up of a body and that we are composed of complex parts, there are different types of self-care to address the different parts of our humanity. These are physical, emotional, social, and spiritual. Let me discuss these types in detail and give examples in the next slides. First is physical. This addresses our physical body and our physical needs. We have to take care of our physical body by doing the following things. Sleep. Most healthy adults need between 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night to function at their best. When tired, we must rest. Oftentimes, we refuse to take rests because we tend to think that it is a sign of laziness. But rest is actually also productive. If we don't rest, we'll just crash and all the more can't do things that are productive. Next is physical exercise. You can do stretching, walking, or yoga. Exercising is something I've recently started to do. I started end of July and I make it a point to do physical exercises at least 5 times a week. So far, it has shown visible effects not just on my body but also on my mental health. Not only do I have more energy, but my moods are more stable also. Eating healthy is another type of self-care for the physical aspect. Don't you notice that when we eat junk food, like sweets or chips, we tend to feel worse than when we eat healthy stuff like fruits and vegetables? Plus, it affects our beauty. We tend to break out with pimples when we eat oily and too sweet things. When we eat healthy, we feel better and look better too. Drinking water is a very important thing also. An adult should be drinking 9 to 13 cups of water a day. That's about 2 to 3 liters a day. Last for the physical aspect is hygiene. Make sure that you brush your teeth and take a bath every day. Even if we have nowhere to go to during this lockdown, we should still take a bath. It makes us feel refreshed and keeps us from getting sick. The next type of self-care is emotional. This set of practices is admittedly not that easy to do because it needs skills building before we can master it. But I assure you, it can be learned with practice and determination. The first one of these is stress management. There are different ways of managing stress, like meditation and focusing on your breath. Emotional maturity is defined by the ability to manage our emotions and take full responsibility for our actions. This can be done by being mindful of our emotions, to be able to own them and not blame to others when something goes wrong. In relation to emotional maturity, when someone does something wrong to us, it is important to show forgiveness. Forgiveness is the release of resentment or anger. It will surely make us feel better when we forgive someone who caused us to be hurt. The last point is compassion. It literally means to suffer together. Among emotion researchers, it is defined as the feeling that arises when you are confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering. Self-compassion is another thing. It is being kind to yourself. Oftentimes, we are too harsh on ourselves. We tend to self-flagellate ourselves and punish ourselves when we are already feeling hurt to start with. More often than not, we are our worst enemies. Instead, we must stop that and ask ourselves, how can I comfort and care for myself at this moment? The next type of self-care is social. It consists mostly of our connections with other people. First of these is boundaries. We have to set boundaries because sometimes when we don't, we end up getting burned out or hurt. Next is about positive social media. There are a lot of toxic things in social media, and we have to make sure to stay away from all those. When something or someone is toxic, you can mute or unfollow them. Also, try not to spend too much time on social media because it can also tire you out. Next up is communication. Make sure to let yourself be heard. If you need to say something, make sure to say it out loud for people to hear you. Things left unsaid will forever be left unsaid, and sometimes that can hurt. Last is to surround yourself with people. Make sure these are nourishing people. Your support systems are very important, especially now. We may be doing physical distancing, but we can always stay connected virtually. Make sure to spend time together with family or friends. I, for a fact, live alone, but I stay connected with my friends by making online calls with them regularly. And if ever you need assistance, do not ever hesitate to ask for help. A lot of people are available to provide their assistance for you. Do not be shy or ashamed because asking for help is actually a sign of courage. The last type of self-care is spiritual. I'm quite confident that as active youth ministers, you're already practicing some kind of spiritual type of self-care in your daily lives. In any case, here are the different examples of spiritual self-care. First is prayer or meditation. There are different types of prayer you can do, even just talking to God about your day or the things you are grateful for. For meditation, you can do different mindfulness exercises, the simplest one being focusing on your breath. There are a lot of guides online, or you could download apps that could help you. The next one is to just spend time alone with yourself. You could do this by sitting by your sacred space or connecting with nature by tending to your plants. Shout out to the plantitos and plantitas out there. And the last one is by writing down your thoughts. There are different types of journaling. You could just keep a log of your experiences, or something that could be really helpful is keeping a list of things that you are grateful for. A gratitude log. The last point in the spiritual type of self-care is making art. Now, this is my favorite because as I said in my introduction, I am an artist. Keeping in touch with your creative side helps a lot with self-care. It doesn't matter if you're not artsy or that creative. The important thing is the process or the experience in creating art. No one is there to judge whether your art is good or not, because in the first place, all art is good art. So those are the different types of self-care. You can mix and match the different types and do them at the same time. For example, you can do physical exercises with your family and friends. Just make sure to observe social distancing. And that's both physical and social. You can also do art together in a form of a support group. So that's both social and spiritual. Just remember though that what's useful for one person may not be necessarily useful for someone else. Just try and see what works for you and build on those practices. When we practice self-care, we take care of ourselves physically, mentally, and emotionally. We could also include spiritually to the mix. Now, let me focus on the aspect of mental health. Mental health is something that's quite hard to recognize. Physical needs are easy to take care of. When you're hungry, you eat. When you're tired, you sleep. When you're dirty, what do? You bathe. But practicing self-care for your emotional and mental well-being might mean doing things that are not always easy or comfortable. These could mean setting boundaries from toxic people. We have to keep away from people that hurt us, but it's not always easy to do that. Self-care also relies on increased self-awareness. This helps us recognize patterns in our emotions, including events or situations that can trigger bad feelings within us. When we are self-aware, we are also able to recognize the activities or tasks that are necessary for our well-being, soothe negative symptoms, and bring us pleasure or relaxation. Self-care is one of the practices that can bring us mental health and well-being. Self-care is important because if we don't take care of it, if we don't take care of ourselves, it might lead to more serious mental health issues like anxiety and depression. This pandemic is really a tough one. Most people, even without an existing diagnosed mental health condition or illness, have been experiencing an elevated amount of stress and anxiety. Stress and anxiety is now universal. You may find yourselves experiencing them in unconventional ways. This could be loss of sleep or too much sleep, vivid and weird dreams, eating too much or not having an appetite to eat at all, or you could feel tired easily or in longer periods of time. Times are hard, but we have the capacity to stand against it. Remember the definition of self-care? It is the action of actively protecting our well-being and happiness during periods of stress. That is where we are now. We are in a period of stress. We are in a period of elevated stress. Let's not let this pandemic get the better of us. Practice self-care and we'll survive this. Now, let me share with you 3 points that you can do as a youth minister in practicing self-care. The first one is to love yourself. A healthy sense of self-love and self-care should always lead us to growing in love and loving others the best way God allows us to. remember that God loves us, and so we must love ourselves too. In loving ourselves with the same love that God loves us with, we can therefore love others also. The second thing is to find time for prayer. As a minister, it is important to have a regular time for prayer daily and to treat your work as a prayer too. Especially this time of the pandemic when there seems to be less boundaries when one is working from home. We must really set aside a specific time for prayer and make it a time with God. Now that we are working from home, we cannot distinguish what's time for work or time for ourselves anymore. What more? Time with God. And that leads us to the last point, which is to listen to God. By having regular prayer time, we also get to be sensitive to God's promptings. And we will know when to give more and when it is enough. Let God be God, and He will guide you to know when to rest and when to share yourselves to others. My parting words with you are these. You cannot pour from an empty cup. This just means that you cannot give when you yourself are empty. If you are tired or feeling very desolate, please practice self-care. Doing self-care will prevent you from being empty. As shepherds to our young people, it is important that we remain available for them. Even Jesus took time to rest. He would occasionally go up to the mountains to retreat and spend time for himself. That is his self-care. Be like Jesus. Recharge so that you can share yourself again. Don't let yourselves go empty. So that's it for tonight. I hope you learned a thing or two from my sharing this evening. Just remember, our times right now may be hard, confusing, and tiring, but you have the capacity to take care of yourself. Just practice your active role of protecting your happiness and well-being. You got this. So thank you, and that's all from me. I'll hear from you live during the open forum for your questions and insights. Thank you.